I guess it all starts with the stories for me.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Chaotic Culture Podcast. Justin is not officially back for season 2, but we're doing something fun today. My name is Linnaea, singer-songwriter, producer of my new album Blush, and your host for today's episode. Here with us today is a new artist coming fresh off the release of his introspective, expansive, and moving debut album RORSCHACH. Please welcome Cairo Croon.
Hello. Oh, what a sweet intro for me. Thank you. Thank you
so much for being here. You know I have a soft spot for this album. Of course. So just to get started, I mean, you're new to the field. You're not new in your knowledge of the field or your understanding of the nuances and inner workings.
Right.
But this is the debut album.
It's it.
It is. And so I guess I wanted to jump back into sort of your background in your knowledge of the music industry. Specifically, I was wondering if you could speak to some of the artists that you've kept a close eye on, and if you've been keeping track of things that you've put in your pocket for your own artistry by following a couple of artists that I know you know very well.
Yeah, well, so I can track for you the exact musical history for me. Mm-hmm. I fell in love with music through Michael Jackson. Mm-hmm. He was my introduction to the concept of music. Mm-hmm. And so I have a very, even now, unfortunately, I have a very close relationship with his music. Mm-hmm. And so that was at, I think, 4 or 5 is when I got introduced to music.
Got it.
I got introduced to hip-hop music through Kanye West's Gold Digger. Mm. When I was maybe 7 years old.
I think me too, honestly.
So these are 2 huge greats, right?
Yeah.
And great introductions to music.
Right.
The different genres that they exist or whatever. And then when I was a child, we were heavy churchgoers, Black churchgoers specifically. So I was very heavy into gospel music. Kirk Franklin, Donnie McClurkin, Dietrich had all of these huge gospel singers. And I've always been around music and theater and everything else like that. I think I started playing piano when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
And played for 12 and a half years.
Oh, wow.
I sang in my school's choir. Was always getting solos and shit because I wanted the attention to be on me. And I'm I can sing better than any of you anyway, so why don't I just keep doing
Give me
that?
the mic, shut up.
It didn't take though until I think I got into high school where I started really paying attention to the artists that were around me. Mm-hmm. First of which was Frank Ocean, who is a cornerstone of my being, both as a musician but as a queer person and as a queer musician, right? Something about Channel Orange remains so moving to me, and remains to be such a beacon of what I can be as a musician. Frank, Chance the Rapper's old stuff, not so much now, but so Frank, Chance, Tyler the Creator's old stuff, Kendrick Lamar. I came up during a very interesting time in not only hip hop music but music in general, where all of these people who I think are making all these new grounds are starting to bubble up. Mm-hmm. The early 2000s was a really trash time for music. It was bad, in general. I fell in love with music for myself during a renaissance, which I am eternally grateful for. So Frank, I think for me is my core influence. But I pull influence from hip-hop without necessarily utilizing it because I don't like rapping, and nor do I think I'm that good at it. But there is an energy inherent in hip-hop music that I am drawn to, and I feel I have access to because I'm Black.
Right. Oh,
so
yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And so now we're here, and I pull influence and inspiration from literally any and everybody. So yeah,
and I think particularly Frank Ocean is really who I wanted to get you to speak to, because that's been so powerful for you. And I think I'm curious more specifically, you said, not just Frank as queer and as an artist, but as a queer artist.
Yeah.
And kind of other artists who have similarly, you've watched how they have come into their own and into the spaces.
Yeah.
And you are on your path with that right now.
Yeah.
What have you noticed in their journeys that you would like to see for yourself?
It is their ability to speak about who they are, like very specifically speak to it. I distinctly remember when I got introduced to Frank's music, like hearing that he was singing about like loving men and that making me extremely uncomfortable when I was 15 years old, and listening to Channel Orange and then getting to Forrest Gump, and having to turn it off because I was like, this is not okay for him to be singing like this. It terrified me. I was like, he can't do that. Looking back on it, it made me uncomfortable because it was like he was speaking directly to me, and I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't start dealing with that until I was like 19, 20 years old. Channel Orange came out when I was like 15.
Yeah.
So when I'm hearing him say, "You run my mind, boy," I'm like, nah. So the progression of that song specifically, I remember skipping it every time it came on for a long time. And then I was like, well, let me listen to it. And then I was like, well, it sounds like a good song. And then I listened to it more and more. And then I was like, well, it doesn't make me gay listening to the whatever.
Of course.
And so here we are now. Well, and I can actually, there's a step before that. In high school, when I started making music, I was a cover artist, going under the name J Nunn first, then as Croon, as it would turn out, which is half of how we got here.
Indeed.
During my days as a cover artist, one of the main things that I would cover actually quite frequently was Forrest Gump by Frank Ocean.
And how did you make that jump from discomfort to covering it all the time? It
became, this thing where I was like, well, music does not make you gay or straight or whatever. I was like, I'm just singing lyrics. I was like, it genuinely didn't matter to me back then. I was like, well, they're just words. I like Frank Ocean's music a whole lot. It's not really doing anything to me. Looking back on it now, though, I was like speaking it into myself. Right. And I was like really I listened to that song every week. Yeah. Like to this day, because it's still so powerful. And that's Frank in his like baby gay stages.
Oh, totally.
That's before he starts like really explicitly talking about the relationship aspects of it, and him instead of him just like broad strokes abstractly speaking from the perspective of Jenny from a movie.
Right, I mean, schoolboy crush.
Yeah, level. Kind of a thing like that, which is, that kind of the progression of my own queerness, right? You go from this stage of adolescence into, I now feel a lot more grown in my like feelings and like ability to maneuver through queer relationships. Yeah. And I owe a lot of that to Frank. And I always tell people that like the relationship that I have with his music and my queerness is like a chicken and the egg thing. I don't know if he unlocked something or if I went to his music to help me out. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
So I can't tell, which is why I can't leave Frank behind ever. Because he means too much to me. I owe way too much to him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. Love Frank Ocean.
Oh my
Stream
God.
Blonde. Stream Channel Orange.
RORSCHACH has a whole new meaning. Wow. Okay. And then that ended up being the bonus track.
Yeah. And Pom Poms ended up being the bonus track because of, I know that there are people who are listening to me as Cairo Croon who have been listening to me since I was J Nunn, and I'm like, I see you, I appreciate you, look where I'm at right now, and look how far I've come, because Pom Poms is way different than what I was like doing as a cover artist, right? Like I feel an emotional connection to Forrest Gump now, and so it had to start. That had to be the bonus track for this album because it's my first one. Yeah. And it's the one that I'm like, it's a thank you letter to those who have been supporting me since I was 15 years old. I'm 22 now. These people have been listening to me for ages and have always been like, so when are you going to put out your own music? When are you going to... And I was never going to do that.
I know.
I never thought that I could do that. If you had asked me 2 years ago, even maybe a year and a half ago, I'd be like, well, I can't write music. I'm not supposed to do that. I can sing other people's stuff. I can make it sound really pretty, but I don't have the capacity to write my own stuff. Now.
Yeah, look at you now.
Here we are.
Wow. And so what would you say as a cover artist your sound was? Did you think you had figured out your sound as a cover artist?
I just knew that I can play music completely by ear. So I would be able to hear a song completely deconstructed and then rebuild it with my own instrumentals on GarageBand, actually. I don't remember ever feeling like I had a sound necessarily, but my voice, I feel like, is so distinctive that I'm like, there's always been something that has set me apart from like other folk who do cover stuff, because I am doing it on my own.
Right.
I was literally rebuilding entire like musical pieces on my own with my own instrumentals, and like would do different arrangements of different things. But I never thought that I had a sound, but I will say that in talking to artists that I have worked with in the past, who have always been like, well, you know, I really want to sound like this person, or I really want to sound like this person. They're like, well, what do you think? And I always have to tell people, I'm like, you need to at first sound like yourself. The last thing I'm ever worried about is sounding like Childish Gambino. And you know, my brother, when the album came out, he was like, oh, you sound like Childish Gambino and Frank Ocean. And I was like, I sound like Cairo Croon.
Right, yeah.
I don't sound like anybody else because I'm not trying to, right? I don't want to bite off of other people's stuff, number one. And it's also like, I can't do what Frank Ocean or Gambino does, nor, though, can they do what I do.
Exactly.
Period.
Oh, amen.
Which is where I want to be.
Absolutely.
I want to be in my own lane, and I very much am.
Yeah, totally. So on that note, I mean, it's pretty obvious that as you listen to Rorschach start to finish, I don't know how many genres you're touching on. I couldn't even begin to list them. But everything is Cairo Croon because of your voice.
Yeah.
Because of your voice, your writing style.
Yep.
So my original question in that vein was, how does it feel to occupy so many genres? Is that something that stresses you out, or is it something that you are more and more comfortable with?
I can't be a singular expression of myself. There's too many parts, too many spaces, too many manifestations, too many lines, too many curves, too many journeys, too many mountains, so many rivers, so many.
That sounds like we rehearsed that setup. I want to be clear that we did not.
Totally did not. No, I can't imagine trying to sit down and be like, I want to make an album that sounds like this genre of music. Nah. It's so restrictive.
Yeah.
And especially for this album, right? I have some ideas about what I want to do sonically for the next two things that I'm working on. But for this album, I really was like, it's, you know, the concept of an ink blot, right?
Yeah.
Is you getting not a blank canvas, but you getting these very abstract images, these things that look like they're like segments of a void.
Yeah.
And you imprinting yourself onto the ink blots, onto those pieces of the void, and bringing your life into them. So the whole thing was, I want stuff that doesn't sound like anything. Yeah. And I'm going to make it sound like me. It doesn't sound like a genre, but it sounds like Cairo Croon, right? So every song sounds like Cairo Croon, but I don't know what Cairo Croon sounds like. But I did not spend the amount of time that me and you spent on the album thinking about or chasing or trying to find what Cairo Croon sounds like. Right. Because I just sound like me, whatever that means.
We could have never reached where we ended up had we been aiming for it.
Yeah, it would have been, because we would have been trying to hit something and then continually missing.
Right.
I think that there are definitely songs that occupy genres. Telephone is a pop song.
Yeah.
Demon is a rap song inherently.
Yeah.
I think Mountaintop, for all intents and purposes, is like an R&B song. So I think that there are moments on the album that occupy genre.
Yeah.
But I intentionally was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. I don't want to.
And yet, I feel like I was just pulling random sounds, random chord progressions out of my ass and sending them to you, and you were like, you know what? That's exactly what Valley has always been in my head.
Yeah. The interpretation of this project has been really, really interesting, right? You would send me stems.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, oh, there it is. Like I remember we were talking about What Do You See? We were talking about Valley before we got to those.
Right.
And then you sent me the Sad Cali beat and the what is it called? What's What Do You See called? Because Sad Cali is Valley.
Think What Do You See was just like an idea.
Yes.
It might have been that
there
one.
There we go. And I just remember on Valley, the doom, doom, doom. I was like, I feel like I'm looking around in a valley right now.
Yeah.
And the whole creation of this project has been about feeling, right? It's been about, what does this instrumental make me feel, and why does it make me feel like that? Right. And then from there we go to the writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I don't remember when exactly it clicked. It wasn't too long into our process when I said, wait, holy shit, we're doing like to these stems, like you are projecting onto them the way you would an ink blot.
It was an ink blot. We were doing ink blot tests.
But sonic ink blot.
And we had no idea. It was the most meta thing. Yeah.
Top off. I couldn't believe it.
It was ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
The most meta thing we ever could have done.
Right. Oh,
because when you said that, I was like, oh my God.
I thought you'd been thinking like and planning it the whole time. So I was like, I'm just so slow to this. Like I didn't figure it out.
No, I had no idea. I mean, I knew that the concept of the instrumentals was going to be ink blots, but I didn't think that I was literally going to be like, this is what this beat is. And it dictated my emotional state, right? I was having to, when I heard Valley, I was having to explore. I'm like, this beat makes me feel really sad. And I was like melancholic and hopeless. Why does it make me feel like that?
Right.
Valley.
Yeah, and you specifically told me from the get-go, don't send me a song, don't send me a beat, send me sound. Send me abstract sound. And that was the coolest opportunity I think a producer can ever be given.
I wanted nothing finished. I didn't want you to have I didn't want you to have made a song and then have been like, oh, I finished this whole joint. Here it is. Nah. I wanted as little as we possibly can, and then I'll be like, this is what this song is now. Let's go in that direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, since we kind of broke down the visuals around like the ink blot and how that was a part of your thinking process.
Right.
I mean, that is such a visual concept for an album, and that is something that I often play between visuals and sound and conjuring imagery through sound. And so how do you feel you went about that for this album? Do you feel that visual at play in various songs more strikingly?
I think that I think it always started with the visual, and then I had to explore why the visual, right? So I think one of the first beats we got was Maelstrom.
Yes, definitely.
And I just remember thinking about the Kingdom Hearts video game, and the intro of that, in which the main character is literally falling through this void, and he's asking himself this question: am I drowning? Am I falling? What's happening? And this other game called Inside, which is a crazy dystopian video game, but there's a point in which he's drowning, like falling through all this water and sinking to the bottom. And I remember feeling like my lungs were filling up with water when I was listening to that beat for the first time, and I was like, what is going on here? On the other side of that, we have songs like Idol and like Smoke, in which I was like, the drums on Idol I was like, this sounds exactly like some like tribal shit. And Smoke, I was like, I feel like I'm in a speakeasy right now. So I've been very visual. I'm a visual based artist. You gotta remember with me, like, yes, I've been making music for as long as I've been making music for, but I also like have directed my own short films. I've been directing music videos for, like, you know, I'll like make a Kanye West music video myself or whatever.
Right, I remember those, yeah.
So the visuals start, and I spent a lot of my youth writing short stories and fiction and stuff like that, like little novels or whatever. Like in 7th grade, I had like a series or whatever that I was writing and distributing out to my entire school on my own.
You're so fucking great. Oh my God.
So the visuals for me have to come first, or else the music can't come. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine just being like, oh, well, it sounds... no. And it's also like, I was thinking about this a couple weeks ago. I don't think that I'll ever be the kind of artist that's going to be able to just make singles without the context of an album. Right. So what I mean when I say that is that, like, I think that I'm only ever writing albums and not anything else. Yeah. Because conceptually, what is a single without an album? You feel me? So it's like, it has to exist in a context. They're not just coming out of a void. Even if I were to start with like a single, I immediately would be like, okay, so this single now exists in this world or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, very visual.
And it's very much I've noticed that in how you've discussed what you want to do for your next project, and also for Rorschach, this world building.
Yes.
That I very much associate much more with writing, with like fictional writing and things like that.
Right.
And I think it's when you sent me those clips from those video games that it clicked for me what your headspace actually was.
Yeah.
And the trajectory of a character reaching a goal point.
Yes, always.
And that not linear quality, but like that direct objective.
Stories.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell stories. In Rorschach, in album 2 and in album 3, I'm trying to tell stories. Because at the end of the day, like, I am a storyteller. Yeah. Like, and I was a storyteller before I started making music. And so I am now just a storyteller who happens to sing sometimes. It's the same thing. Yeah. And it's longer form story. It's not even longer form. It's a different kind of storytelling. Yeah. It's shorter form, but it's harder because you have to write in a certain context in these little 3-minute increments. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. I love that challenge. I think the time imposition on that, and also that you can swap so drastically between genres. For example, on Rorschach, jumping from demon to glacier
to then idol. I just thought about how crazy that probably sounds to people. Demon to glacier to idol is crazy. Well, and the thing about demon is that like demon, we set ourselves up in a way where it was always going to sound like really crazy coming off of it, because demon is just so, I don't know what I was doing. Like,
I was never expecting what you sent back to me.
I was never expecting to rap on the album. When you sent me the demon beat, I was like, I'd heard it, and it was one of those beats like Smoke where I was like, oh, okay, like, I might not be able to use this one because it's it's gonna make me rap, and I don't want to do that. And I was putting it on or whatever, like listening to the beat by my piano, and I was like, I've been in hell without you, nothing. And I was like, wait, what's happening? I was like, wait, what? Like,
my body's betraying me. Yeah, like, how is this just?
And I've talked about, I think by the time this comes out, the Genius annotations will be out or whatever. But it made me uncomfortable rapping because it's not a space that I occupy. But I am not interested in censoring myself. So I was like, I'm rapping right now, and I was like, oh, it's weird, but we're gonna keep going.
Oh yeah.
And it's part of the reason why Demon is the shortest song is because I was like, I'm not about to be rapping for 3 minutes. Yeah. I didn't want to do that.
I hadn't thought about it like that. I was like, this is distilled into exactly what it needs to be.
It is, but that is because I did not want to occupy that space for longer than I was comfortable with. Even listening to Demon now, I'm like, I can't believe you did that. That came out of nowhere for me. Right. Came out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah. And I think that like second voice recording of like the demon voice in it totally makes it. Yeah. And it's so theatrical. Yes. It might be one of the most theatrical moments on the album. It might be,
and it's so interesting because it's the shortest piece. Right. It's so, and I did want that track to be as short as possible because of what I just said, but also because I was like, short tracks are fun because it's like, it's a challenge, right? How much can you do in 60 seconds versus 3 minutes? Right. You know what I mean? It's a completely different game you're playing.
Well, and overall brevity is very important to you. You've tweeted about this. You talk about this. The album is 27 minutes?
27, 28, something like that.
Yeah. Explain that to me. Talk to me about
it's the brevity. Most important thing to me, actually, I think. Brevity before anything else. Niggas be talking for too long on these albums. They be saying too many things that don't actually mean anything. They be making albums that are 50 minutes long when it's like 25 minutes of that could have been cut. Why is Drake's Scorpion an hour and a half long? Huh?
Because he can.
But
not because he should.
Like, and that's my thing is that like so many artists, I think they do things because they can, and I'm like, did you ask yourself if you should do those things? Yeah. Brevity is important to me because I think it's important to not say more than you should. I can't imagine like trying to make Rorschach some 15, which by the way, I mean, I knew it was going to be 10 tracks before I came to you with it.
I know.
Right? It was all very planned out.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to make some 15 to 20 track album. It would have felt tired. It would have felt forced. the songwriting would have suffered greatly had I not done that. I also just think that I'm a product of how the music industry is changing. The music industry is getting shorter form. A lot of, I can call them my contemporaries because I make music now.
Yes.
So like Tierra Whack's Whack World. I don't know if you've actually listened to it yet.
Oh, I have. Yes.
Like, it's a 15-minute album, and some of those songs literally cut off midway through the... like,
yes.
Which is a thing when I first heard...
That was a game changer, though.
It really was.
Absolute.
Tierra Whack, we're going to find out in 5-6 years that she was the most influential artist of this generation. We don't recognize her right now, though. We haven't figured it out. Earl Sweatshirt's some rap songs. It baffles me how short you can make a song, but how much you can say in it. And so going into Rorschach, I was like, okay, cool. So I want a short piece, right? Part of it, admittedly, is because I didn't want to be in this emotional state for too long.
Right. Right.
It was. At times it was very taxing for me emotionally writing Rorschach, and I just remember being like, I don't really want to be doing that for longer than I need to. But I don't ever want to be taking up more space than necessary. And so Rorschach had to be short. Album 2 has to be short. Album 3 has to be, everything I do, like, it has to be within a certain time frame, unless it's necessary to be longer. Yeah. But I think artists will find that if they ask themselves if it's necessary, the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
It's never necessary to make an album that long. Not even... Channel Orange is 60 minutes long. Blonde is 60 minutes long. You don't need Monks on Channel Orange. You don't really need White on Channel Orange. On Blonde, you do not need Pretty Sweet.
Oh.
At all.
I think I've skipped it every time.
I do. You know, it's an awful song. And this is me I have 2 Frank Ocean tattoos on my arms right now. Right. This is me as a stan saying,
Edit.
Even the greats of us do things that are not necessary because you make projects that are too long. And I'm not saying that Channel Orange or Blonde are projects that are too long. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying there is fat that could have been trimmed off. But that was not, Frank was not like, oh, he deemed it as necessary, so it's on the album.
Right.
Were there more? Did we use all the beats? Did we use every one of the beats in the drive? I
think so, because it was baffling to me that you kept saying yes to everything I was putting in there, and I can't think of one thing.
I think you're right.
There might be one.
There
might be one in January.
Oh yeah, January, and I think there's one from the Upbeats.
I think so.
That we did.
Oh, there was some really bass, heavy, twangy, sort of all over the place.
So
thing.
we didn't use one.
Okay, so
Now imagine for a second if I used that. It's a different album.
Right.
It really is, because we told 10 different stories in the constraints of 26 minutes. Yeah. I don't know what story I could have told other than the ones that we already have. Right. I'm glad that we didn't discover that, because if we would have written to that, I probably would have been like, oh, we got to trash it. Yeah. We didn't have to trash any of the songs that we made, because I loved because I was like, every one of these is completely necessary. Right.
Okay, so on that note, let's talk about Telephone.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about
my
Telephone.
Baby.
Demon baby.
Yeah.
Problem child.
Demon is a bastard. But that, not Demon. Telephone is a bastard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Telephone was one of the first beats that we got. I think we got it. We got
around the same batch. It was definitely the same batch as Maelstrom.
Yeah. We got Maelstrom. We got Telephone in the same batch. I think we might have got
first batch,
maybe one. I think that might have been the first batch.
I think so.
It's Telephone and Maelstrom.
Yeah, and I think you know what we didn't use.
Which one?
I don't know if you're still going to do something with that.
I'm probably
so
not, but you're right. Oh, God,
that was the first batch.
That was. It was Maelstrom, Telephone, and the third one, which we won't talk about.
I might have to steal it.
I was going to say, because I still like that beat, and I still want you to use it. Yeah. I just, whatever.
Yeah. Anyway,
but,
first batch.
So, Telephone was really interesting because I was trying to be very like cinematic in the writing, at least the first time around. So I sat down with the beat initially and talked over the thing for the entirety of it, and talked to myself about what I envisioned every part of the song was going to be. So I was like, okay, so the first verse is me, you know, being in this dream or whatever, in which I'm stuck in this house for however long, and I'm underwater, and all these different things are happening, and this person calls, well, in the context of the album, this girl calls my phone after God knows how long, and I'm struggling to even get to the phone, because, like, the weight of my dream is like, this is not a good idea. Struggle, get to the phone, pick it up, my voice doesn't work, and then I wake up for the second verse. So I was trying to tell a like film within the 3 minutes of it, and wrote to it. And I'll say that Telephone was very hard writing the first time. It was like tricky, because I think, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, for what it's worth, this is my first album. It's the first time I've ever written my own music. So a lot of the first batch was me figuring out, what kind of writer am I? And I don't even know that I necessarily know how to answer that question now, but I was figuring out how to write music. So Telephone, and no one will ever hear this, it sounded incredibly different a couple months ago, even. And it took a while for us to figure it out, like with, as far, you know, me, as far as writing goes, and it's also you, like, as far as like placing different things where they're supposed to go. And I would listen to it, and I would be like, it was the only one on the album where I would be like, okay.
I know.
And
we kept it that way for a long time.
And we didn't talk about it. We never really talked about it. But I was always like, oh, gosh, there's that one over there. And that was more to do with, I was just like, this is not what I wanted it to be anymore. I think I was trying too hard to make it into something, as opposed to letting it be what it is.
Because it was one of your favorite beats from the beginning, and it's one of the simpler ones on the album, too. It remains
my favorite instrumental except for like Glacier and like Idol, it remains my favorite instrumental because there's a simplicity in it. And I think, for what it's worth, I do like how I can connect to a genre in it, right? It was one of the only ones where I was like, oh, this is this song right over here, kind of a thing.
And the audience seems to have picked up on that too.
Oh, they immediately, because Telephone is a crowd favorite, which, good taste, guys.
Yeah,
I'm really, really happy about that.
We say we don't trust an opinion unless Telephone's in your top 3.
Yeah, so. if you're telling me that your favorite 3 songs and they don't include Telephone, you have bad taste in my music, bro. Like, you just do, because Telephone is in my top 3, as it should be. Right. So I don't remember what month in which I like said that it needs to be a complete overhaul, but I think
it might have been as late as February. Honestly.
It might have been.
I really think it was that late.
But I remember being like, so listen, the whole thing has to go. I am the kind of writer in music and in like literature where I don't like doing rewrites unless they are complete overhauls. I don't like doing tweaks, because I'm like, no, there's no.
If it's not working, it's not working.
It's not working.
Yeah.
And if it's not working, it's not working. Not necessarily because of some little small piece. It's probably not working because the whole piece doesn't work. Yeah. So let's burn it to the ground, and
minus the production.
Right. And let's build something, because I still really enjoyed the instrumental, but I was like, I don't like my writing or my voice. I was like straining really hard in certain parts, and I was like, this is just awful.
I loved those lyrics, I have to tell you. Like, I knew we had to scrape it, like, just clean, but I was pretty disappointed that we lost some of that.
Those lyrics were my baby. Yeah. Because it was the first batch.
It was so genuine. It was. And like, and you know, that doesn't always work. I've been in the exact same position with my own music where like, and I often don't have the bravery to say, I'm going to let go of this and take it to where it deserves to go.
Right. So it was a thing where I was like, I am doing a disservice to this song by not allowing it to be what it is. Yeah. So let's restart. And the restarting process for me was very interesting, because so much of the album is tethered to fiction, tethered to metaphor, right? There's layers of it on top of like very small ties to my own personal experiences. Right. Telephone was where I was like, okay, cool. So here's what happened. Right. And Telephone was really not hard to write in that sense, But I was writing it and I was like, oh, you're really about to tell these folks what's going on.
Yeah.
So the first verse I'm happy about. And I'm happy about the whole song. But the first verse was interesting because it's close to the first draft of what we did.
Right.
There's that grandfather clock. There's the dreamscape kind of element to it, right? But it's kind of scaled back a little bit, and there's some other stuff going on. Where we got interesting though was when because I think I wrote the hook first, or the bridge first. I send flowers to our grave once a week or whatever. I wrote that down and I was like, oof. I was like, it made me uncomfortable because I was like, why did you write that? And I was like, oh, it's because you still miss her really crazy, and so that's why you wrote that.
I've got chills. Fuck.
Yeah, it was. So I was like, okay, so that's what you did. So let's just keep going from there. And so the hook got written when the hook got written, and then did the first verse, and then we needed actually, I think we were gonna have a rapper,
right,
for the second verse.
Yeah.
Neither of which were able to get back to us in time, which is totally fine. One of them actually reached out to me personally, which was very, very sweet.
Oh, cool.
And it you know, there was literally no hard feelings. I was just like, well, whatever, because I was getting anxious by this point.
Right.
We were very near the end of the album, and Telephone was getting on my goddamn nerves.
Yes. Yeah.
So I was like, no, I want to finish it. So I'm not about to be waiting for.
And not even because of that verse. There were still so many missing pieces.
Yeah, there was stuff, but I felt like we were just so close, and I was like, I'm getting irritated.
Oh, you were getting
now.
crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I was getting.
I
was getting really cranky. I was like, there were a couple times where I like kind of snapped on Linnaea. Not snapped, but I got snippy with you, and I like texted you that, and then I remember like reading back, and I was like, you shouldn't have said that to me. You didn't have to say that. It was rude.
I was crying. It was fine. You apologized, and I was like, I'm sorry. Did something happen?
Yeah, I apologized to me. I was like, that was too much. I shouldn't have said that to you. I'm sorry. She was like,
oh, you angel.
Like, you're fine.
You angel.
So the second verse happened because I was out of patience, and I wanted to finish it. But the second verse ended up being my favorite verse on the entire album because it's the most biographical, right? Pitfalls, job loss, where do I begin? Found a new love, what would you think of him? Are you proud of all I've done? Do you love me still? Do you love me still? Do you love me still? I wrote Pitfalls, job loss, where do I begin? And I was like, oh, no. I was like, because that's literally exact emotions.
Yes.
I was like,
you can't turn back from there.
You can't. I did away with all of the metaphor, with all of the fiction, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys want to see you want to see me open my chest up really quickly?" Yeah. And I remember being like, "Oh God!" I was like, This second verse is about to be about me, like checking up on her." And her trying to, I want you to check up on me as well. Like there are so many things that I haven't talked to her. I texted her happy birthday last year, and then I texted her a couple weeks before my birthday recently to see where she got this tattoo from or whatever. But we haven't spoken like that in a very long time or whatever. And they're, a 3-year-long relationship I was in. I love her, like present tense. The way I maneuver love, I don't view love as some past tense verb. It's not something that I did and now it's done. No. If I love you, I loved you then, I love you now, and I'm going to continue to love you in whatever context that means, right? So I was like, oh fuck, I'm gonna have to go with this. And then, so I'm bisexual.
What?
Shut up. I started dating, God, this is so crazy. I started dating men like 2 months after me and her broke up, because I was like, when we were in a relationship, I was like, okay, cool. So as soon as this is over, like I'm gonna go. Because it came to a point where I was like, it's probably on its way. We're probably on our way out of this now. So I was like, I need to start figuring out what I want to do. So I started dating men, and fell in love a couple times. And I just remember being like, I wrote something completely different, which the essence of it is still in the song. But what I remember writing is that, like, I am gathering offerings to sacrifice to you, this girl, right? So I was trying to date men who made me feel the same as her, and trying to date men that I felt like she would be proud of me for dating. Funny, because the first one I dated, she would be proud of. She'd be kind of pissed off because that was our mutual homie, which is very messy.
Indeed it is, yeah.
But the second one I laugh about because I was like, she would not be proud of me for dating this motherfucker. He was.
Are you proud of you?
For
this particular individual.
I'm proud of dating him, but I am also proud of myself for breaking up with him.
All right.
Because I needed to.
Yeah.
But I laughed at myself when I was writing that because I was like, she would be like, you idiot. Why would you date him? And it's also like, I think we get so wrapped up in ourselves and we tend to center ourselves and think that we're so important. And I'm like, there's a good chance that after 2 years of us having been broken up, she doesn't give a fuck about what I'm doing, which is totally fine. I don't be thinking about her on a day-to-day basis. So right. I understand that sentiment or whatever. But I just remember being like, I have been dating men subconsciously that I could present to her and be like, hey, like, do you like this one? Who cares? Right. But to
repeat the question, do you love me still 3 times at the end of that verse?
Because that's ultimately the question that I care about.
That's your most human moment on Rorschach.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't care that you know that I'm dating these men. I don't care that I lost my job. I don't care that you're proud of me for any of the things or for making this album. Do you love me still? Like, because I love you still, not in the same capacity, not in the same context, because it is simply not viable to do so anymore.
Right. And love transcends whether or not you have a job, whether or not,
all of that. And it also, love becomes what it needs to be. And so I've always been, I'm like, I wonder if we view love the same. That's really what I'm asking. Do you view love the same way that I do? Because it's like, if I were to go and ask her, like, do you love me still? And she was like, no. In my head, I'm like, well, you never did in the first place. But, so yeah, telephone was where I was like, so let me tell you about what Justin went through for 2 seconds. Right. And then we'll get back to the metaphor, which is why I love that song. And I think that's part of the reason why it has resonated so well with the general populace. Everybody's been like, telephone is crazy.
Right. Shout out to Danny real quick.
Yeah. And I'm like, telephone is crazy because telephone is real.
Yeah.
Telephone is me being very real with myself.
There's no fiction like padding around
at all
to keep you safe.
You can't oh my God, to keep me safe. I felt so vulnerable writing telephone and felt so like weird allowing people to hear that. When the album came out, my friend Zion, DJ Race War, he goes by these days. I love him so much.
Y'all are brother of a feather.
I love him. Oh my God. He texted me and he was like, girl, are you okay?
Like, you haven't heard Demon yet, have you?
And I was like, oh no, just wait. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And it was funny, but I was like, that's kind of the reaction I was looking for, is because I'd laid my whole self out on telephone.
Right.
And so the natural reaction is to be like, are like, what's going on? Because, I didn't know that was going on.
Right.
And I'm like, hey, like, you need to, you have to get through the whole album.
Yeah.
You have to.
But also, what a relief to have people suddenly know that is something that you experienced without you telling them, sitting down telling them.
Absolutely.
Like, it's just out there.
I didn't have to text people individually and be like, I'm going through these
Right.
Like, everybody can hear it readily available. Like, she can hear it if it ever makes it to her. I often wonder if she's listened to it. I often have thought about sending it to her and being like, hey man, I wrote this album after we broke up. Like, ain't that crazy? But like, I'm never gonna do that. But
I know the temptation very well.
I'm like, because but I'm like, I'm not gonna do that because like, if she's supposed to hear it, she'll hear it like everybody else has, and that's totally fine. Yeah. But so telephone, Bastard Child.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that being the most vulnerable took the most work.
Yeah.
Like literal work to get the song finished.
I had to do a lot of introspection and be like, what's going on with you? And then put it out.
Right. And I was just waiting for like the melody to hit correctly. Like I wasn't part of your emotional process at all. I was
No,
just like,
not at all.
Is that verse what we need or is it not?
Right.
And
Whereas I was trying to be like, am I being honest on this song?
Right.
And I am being very honest on that song.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy about it.
And it was crazy for me to be working on a project that was so emotional, but my emotions weren't at stake and my vulnerability wasn't at stake.
No, that's so...
Which is the number one thing about my music making process. I'm like, how do I rip my heart out of my chest?
Right. You were having to create a soundscape in which I could do that for myself, which I think you executed brilliantly.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I've never had more fun on anything I've worked on, frankly. Probably because I didn't have to recollect all of my emotional state every time I finished a song.
No, it was just me. One of these days, I'm gonna release the Google Doc that me and you shared
with the words and phrases.
Yes. In which, so at the beginning, it was both of us equally putting in about the same amount of stuff, and then you can literally see the point in which Linnea drops off, and stops putting stuff in.
I sent you like 4 ideas, and you were like, cool, and I was like, yeah, he doesn't need me. Holy shit, he doesn't need me. No. Like, this is not going to be...
That drive became my diary very quickly.
I stopped checking it. I was like, you know what? That's his space now, and it's perfect. Oh, I would love... I haven't looked at that since probably last fall.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there, man. There's ideas for album 2 and album 3 in there. There's times where I'm not even like speaking in poetry. I'm literally just being like, I hate myself. Like, being very direct about different things.
Am I remembering correctly that the phrase razzle dazzle was on there?
Yeah, the phrase.
That's my one memory from that fucking list.
There's a phrase called razzle dazzle in there because I wanted to make a song called Razzle Dazzle.
And I'm picturing like the Peanut Man, like giving the old razzle dazzle.
Yes, that's literally the space that I was trying to occupy. I just kept thinking, I was like, because you oscillate between being really sad and being like kind of comical about it. So I was like, oh, razzle dazzle, like that's so funny.
It's a great phrase, like 2 great sounding words next to each other, but what a weird association everyone has with
absolutely
it.
Ridiculous. I don't know what I was thinking.
Ugh, unreal. Okay, we've jumped around a lot here, but I'm trying to reel it back in. Well, one thing that I want to make sure I mention, because I know I was going to forget, but...
I'm sorry we talked about telephone for so long, but...
Oh, no, I wanted to, I was going to break it down a lot more than that, but I think we reached a good ending note there. Well, one thing that I didn't really realize until, like, much into the album is that the Rorschach test actually was created in Switzerland by a Swiss doctor.
Yes, yes.
And you had the idea of using this ink blot test as the concept for your album well before you met me, well before I moved to Switzerland. Yep. I mean, like, we talk about the destiny of our paths aligning and the way that manifests, like, in the tiniest decisions we make and the biggest ones. Yeah. And just the fact that, like, I was literally in Switzerland doing this digital, like, massively disparate, like, process. Right.
Based on a Swiss piece of work, honestly.
Like, and a psychological piece of work, too. Yeah. Like, all of it just pieces together.
Quite literally a psychological Swiss piece of work. Yeah. That is really good. This was meant to happen. Yeah. Rorschach was always supposed to have been made. It's always supposed to have been made by me and you. Right. And it was supposed to have been made when it was supposed to have been made. I always told myself, I was like, and I even told the girl who this album is about, because she was like, you should write music. And I was like, it's going to take me and you breaking up for me to do that. Right. I was like, I'm going to have to go through something really awful to be able to write. The interesting thing about that is, what I've always meant when I say that is, right, I need this traumatic event to be able to write something that I need to write. Rorschach needed to happen. I didn't have a choice. Yeah. But now I'm in a position now with the writing where I can write whatever I want to, because I know that I can write now. Right.
Well, and when you're young, you can feel like you're supposed to write what you know, but if your day-to-day experience feels like boring and the same old thing, like, I
don't know anything.
Yeah.
At 15, 16, 17 years old, I don't know anything.
The first song I ever wrote seriously on, like, the guitar in 7th grade, when I was, like, really doing the guitar work there, I wrote a fictional song about my future prom experience and how devastating it was going to be. That's the first song I ever wrote, projecting tragedy onto my future self, because I didn't feel that I could live in it yet.
Yeah, like, you have to... I was going to force myself to lie And I didn't want to do that, or like predict things, or like I didn't want to try to manifest sadness for myself. I was like, no, I'll get sad eventually.
Everyone can tell when you're manifesting a forced sadness.
Yeah, so I always wanted it to feel authentic. So I was like, well, I'll just wait.
Yeah.
And now everything I do feels authentic.
Yeah. Authentically Cairo Croon. Let's talk about the name Cairo Croon.
Ooh. So, like I mentioned earlier, so when I was a cover artist, there was a time where I rebranded, like my freshman year of college for a very brief amount of time, to Croon. The word Croon comes from, I would read a lot of like news publications about Frank Ocean, actually. They would call him an R&B crooner. And I was like, well, what does that word mean? So I went and Googled it. I was like, oh, okay, it's like you're like a singer, like, but it's a different kind of singing, right? You're like kind of, there's a longing involved with crooning. So I was like, what if I was just croon? And so for a couple months, and this was the last time I was a cover artist, I was croon in all capital letters, literally all capital letters. At that time, I had released a cover of Making Mirrors by Gautier, and maybe like Pyramids by Frank, like the first half. But this was during a time where I was like, I'm getting sick of being a cover artist because I'm getting sick of being other people, right? You can call yourself whatever you want as a cover artist. You are still just occupying other people's spaces and not really adding. I mean, you can add your personality, but you're still just, you're masquerading. Yeah. I didn't want to do that. Yeah. So after a certain point, I got rid of the Cairo stuff, started this podcast, actually. So the Chaotic Culture podcast page used to be called Croon, which used to be called J Nutton. So it's the same.
That's the same page.
It's the same page.
Whoa.
I deleted all the music.
Oh my god.
I think I made 15 covers over the course of me being a cover artist or whatever. Pitched all of them.
Deleted, not just like made them private, but
No. They're gone. Deleted. Oh, dude, girl, I'm a deleter. I'm a deleter of stuff.
Trim the fat.
I literally am just like, goodbye. That's done now. Because it was never... I was not making work that I could stand by because it wasn't me. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I need to start making work that I can stand by. The first time that manifested was as this podcast, but then it manifested as Cairo Croon. The word Cairo just simply comes from, I wanted some sort of a tie to blackness, and Cairo is in Egypt. And I hate like the concept of black men being like, oh, we come from kings and we come from pharaohs or whatever. We all come from Egypt. But Cairo Croon just sounds cool.
Yeah.
It's fun. I like having a first and a last name. I like the assonance of it. Yeah. Like a whole lot. So Cairo comes in spite of itself, because if somebody else were to name themselves that, I would have been like, you're fucking lame. But
so do you expect that from your audience?
No. Because nobody. Here's the thing: Zion would have called me out on it by now. Zion would have immediately been like, "Why would you name yourself Cairo?" He would have been like, "That's stupid," or he wouldn't have said that, but he would have laughed at me calling myself Cairo, because he laughed at me, which is you can't co-sign on this, but when I made the account, I followed him on Twitter through the Cairo page, and he was like, "I thought it said Cairo Croon," and we made fun. We were making fun of me for that. He would have made fun of me for it if he thought it was some major issue or whatever. Him not making fun of me, I'm like, okay, cool. So the name can stay. Like, that's totally fine. He's sort of been my, like, marker for how to maneuver as a queer black person, even though he's younger than me. I feel like he's a lot smarter than I am and a lot deeper into his stuff than I am. So I'm like, okay, cool. So what Zion is doing, I'm like, all right, so I can be 15 steps behind that and still be well within my own range. Wow. But we shopped around names, I know, for like a month and a half, maybe 2 months before we settled on Cairo Croon. The beginning of it, I was just going to go by Chaotic Black Boy, because I was like, oh, everybody knows me as the Chaotic Black Boy. Like, it makes sense to sort of do that. And you had mentioned something to me, which at first I was very irritated by.
I was terrified to bring it up. I knew you were going to be pissed.
You were like, well, I don't really like that name because it doesn't really sound... It sounds like a rapper name, and it doesn't sound like something that you... And I remember showing Danny and Val, two of our very good friends, you texted me that in the morning, and I was over at one of their houses at the time, and I ran into their bedroom, and I was like, look what Lakin just said to me. I was like, can you guys believe that she would suggest that it shouldn't be chaotic black? I was like irritated. I was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I was like, it should be chaotic black boy because I said so.
Well, and like, not only, I was like, I had already started like working. We had worked on a number of the songs, but like I think Maelstrom was mostly done by the time I brought this up.
Yeah, basically done.
And I was like, is that chaotic to you? And you had a really good point
explanation
about
as
what
to why
chaos,
I thought it was
like,
chaotic.
Right.
And I still stand by the concept of my music there being an element of chaos in it, especially on Rorschach.
Yeah.
But I just remember being like, this white bitch don't know what she talking about.
Well, it wasn't my place, and I was like, I'm just going to say it, and then I'm going to walk away.
But so what has happened a lot on this project, which is why I've appreciated working with you as my first producer, is because you have never had an issue being like, this doesn't work. And here's why I think it doesn't work. And even though I was like, well, I just blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I listen to what you say all the time.
You do.
And you told me that, and you told me the reasons why you don't think it should be chaotic black boy. And it made me irritated for like 24 hours. And then I was like, she's right. So then I was like, all right, so let's start shopping around names. Cairo Croon was among the first names. I'm calling him a friend, even though he's like 55 years old. I think he is.
Friend.
I think Simon is like in his 50s. He's gonna be mad if he ever hears this, and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm not 50." Whatever.
I'll be sure to send it to
however
him.
old Simon is, he's a British dude from Tottenham, who I met through this family that I've been babysitting for like 3 years. And I told him I was a journalism major. And he started affectionately calling me Journo, which I thought was just the cutest thing. And I still think it's just so cute that he calls me that. So the name Journo got into the mix or whatever. So it was Cairo Croon, Journo, Chaotic Black Boy, and Saint Sycamore, which I'm so irritated that we could never actually get, because that would have been really cool. Now I can't imagine being anybody else but Cairo Croon at this point. We're too far in.
I feel like they have a similar
they do.
color scheme to them almost.
Ooh, wow.
That's how I feel.
That's really interesting.
Gold and green,
yes.
like boom.
Well, because Sycamore, like I was thinking trees, right? Brown and green and everything else like that. Very earthy tones.
Yeah.
The only reason that we didn't go with Saint Sycamore, the literal only reason, is because there was somebody already out right now making music going by the name Saint Sycamore.
Right.
And I was infuriated. I was so upset about that. And I was like, well, we can't go with Saint Sycamore. I was like, I don't really want to go with Journo. I like having a first and a last name. We're not.
Well, you asked me about Journo without the context of the cute little story. You just said, "What do you think of Journo?" And I said, "DiGiorno's frozen pizza."
Oh yeah.
I was like, that is what everyone's going to think.
And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh yeah, we can't go with Journo anymore.
And then we also we were set on Croon as a last name, but we tried throwing a couple other things, and I don't remember what they were.
Me neither.
But
and like I said, like it feels weird even thinking about being somebody else at this point, because I feel like I've always been Cairo Croon, which sounds so pretentious, but I'm like, this is who I always should have been, is Cairo Croon. So it just makes sense to now I get to call myself who I am. Right. Very interesting. I finally feel like I'm like, oh, I'm myself now. Great.
Yeah. And I love that you have the opportunity to be Cairo Croon and be your most vulnerable self, and then you have this other alternate persona for discussing other people's work.
Absolutely. Well, and that was another reason why you said that Chaotic Black Boy didn't necessarily work, because the chaotic branding, which I hate saying that I have a brand, even though that's literally what I have
a logo.
That's what I very intentionally created for myself as a brand.
Yes.
The chaotic brand is the brand in which I talk about stuff that's going on in the world, pop culture, music, whatever it might be or whatever. Whereas Cairo is like, I don't care about none of that. Yeah. I don't think about any of it when I'm writing as Cairo Croon. I'm like, this is me now talking. So when you were like, you need a separation of self, I was like, I need a separation of self. Like, it was, I was like, she's so right. Because I can't imagine being chaotic black boy and then getting on the Chaotic Culture podcast, having just bared my whole self. I'm like, oh no, there needs to be a separation of church and state.
I'm Cairo Croon and I'm here to interview.
It would have been a mess.
Yeah.
I think that I would have been a whirlwind of a person if I wouldn't have separated myself.
Yeah.
And I think that both of these mediums would have suffered. I think that I would have suffered as a writer, as a songwriter, as chaotic black boy, and I think the podcast would have suffered immensely. And I think, like, for all intents and purposes, like, my Twitter feed would have suffered. Like,
oh yeah,
because I'm very intentionally, like, I'm not huge on Twitter by literally any wide margin, but I'm very intentional as to what I'm doing on Twitter.
Yes.
Like, it is, none of what I'm doing is a mistake. Ever, actually.
Oh, I know. That's why I want you to run my Twitter starting tomorrow.
Even if it looks like a mistake, it's not.
Right.
I promise you that it's not.
Right. Okay, well, I've got a couple more. What are we at time-wise?
I don't even know. The GarageBand tells you what, like, measure you're at, and we are at 1797 right now.
I feel like we're at about an hour in.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
I'm going to ask a few more questions.
I'm good with it. This feels good.
Yes. So, let's see. I wrote some good questions.
Being interviewed is a very underrated experience.
Oh, I know.
This is very fun.
I think it changed my life when you interviewed me for the first time. I was like, I want to be interviewed every day. I have so many interesting thoughts and ideas.
Right, I'm like, ooh, look at me, listen to me talk for a second. Like, ooh.
Okay, so let's see. I'm going to go with, I want to know more about your mindset when you actually sit down to record. So we talked about that with telephone for a bit, but that wasn't the process for the majority of your recording, of your writing.
No.
Like, you work really quickly. We talk a lot about spontaneity in your work. So, like, what's going through your head in the moments before you hit record, or, like, when you're sitting down to flesh out something you started?
So you had actually asked me this a couple months ago when we were trying to do something similar. And I didn't have a good answer at the time as to what my writing process was. But now that I've started writing the second thing, I can look back and I know what I was doing for this one, which was that it was instrumental based, right? So I would have to get the instrumental first and be like, okay, so this is where this is going. And I'm always trying to build worlds.
Right.
So I always start with... Before I start singing, before I start doing any of that, I literally will sit with the beat and talk to myself over the beat as to, okay, so what story am I trying to tell with this?
You did that for every track? Every instrumental I sent you?
I
didn't know that.
Whether I recorded it or not, it differed on the track. But every song I sat down and I listened to it, and I would be like, okay, so this song is about this, and we're going to do this thing for, not necessarily, like, figuring out exactly, like, lyrically what I was going to do, but I was, like, structure-wise, okay, cool. So on Maelstrom, I was like, so I feel like the first verse is me, like, I was going through just like that.
And you recorded that?
I did.
Do you have those?
I might have the Maelstrom recording, and I might have the telephone recording. Those are the only two that I remember, like, actually, maybe Valley too. But I think because I was getting a feel for who I was as a writer, I was having to talk myself through what I was going to write about.
Brilliant way to get started.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so let me get this cushion for myself really quickly. Yeah. And then, so there have even been, so, like, I think on telephone, like, there in the first couple drafts, like, I would be singing over the parts I was talking over.
Oh, cool. Wow. Just
like whenever I would be like, oh, so this part of the thing needs to be like this, and I'd be like, like, whatever.
Right.
So the writing for this, I think, has been very driven by the instrumentals, but there's a gap of time between when we finished Rorschach, and when I started working on these next two things. So I was ahead of myself mentally, right? I was writing stuff before I had instrumentals for it. But it's still, at the end of the day, I think Rorschach and Album 2 and Album 3, even though the process has been a little different, I think I'm interested in world building first. Yeah. And then from there figuring out exactly what it means, like what world I'm trying to build. And Rorschach is me building 10 worlds. 10 very small worlds that exist.
You see them as that disjointed?
They exist within a universe.
Okay.
Right? maybe parallel dimensions is a different way to look at it, right?
Okay.
So, but they're 10 distinct worlds, very distinct, which one person travels through.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see.
That's the tether.
Yes.
It's still because it's still me going through all the world, but it's 10 different worlds that I'm traveling through.
Yeah.
Album 2 is one world. Album 3 is one world. This one is 10 worlds.
Yeah.
In a universe that I travel through. So that, I think, that is the key to Cairo Croon's writing, is world building first. It just is a matter of how many worlds do I want to create today, which is so godlike.
Yeah.
It's so like, oh, it's so big and so massive or whatever, but it's literally like Maelstrom exists in a different location than does Valley and does Telephone,
right,
and does any of the songs.
Right.
Like,
you go from a dry desert valley to like underwater,
yes,
in a single jump. So yeah.
Absolutely. Smoke takes place in a club. Like, that's a world. The whole world is just a club.
Yeah.
It's not me building the earth 10 times. It's me like telling you this photograph, but the photograph is the whole world. So like the club in Smoke, it's the only thing that exists at all
in that world. Yeah.
The valley in Valley, it's the only thing that exists. It's nothing else but that.
Right.
So yeah, it's been about world building and storytelling for me.
Yeah.
Bare bones.
Well, since you brought up Smoke, I guess this is a space to dive into.
Baby. I love that song.
Yes. Well, I want to talk about that in the context of, I have just one note here, one line that says, collaborating with whites. So you have 2 featured artists on Rorschach. They both happen to be
white women. Yeah.
And it was just revealed that the producer for the next project
is a white man. Which I can talk about this. I don't have a problem telling you all who's producing my next album, because that's all I'm telling you anyway.
Yeah, that's like
my next album right now is being produced by a person named Dupree, who is a white man who lives, I believe, in Dallas, Texas. Who I, met as I met a lot of people, including Linnaea, through the internet. Rorschach was made by a white woman. It's so crazy. Smoke was made by a white woman. Idol was made by a white woman. Those songs are really crazy. Now, I know you have... I
am, like, the discomfort I
you
feel
have
around
feelings
that.
about having made those songs, and I understand it.
Right.
But I think for me, like, the reason why I didn't have an issue you making those songs is because you're self-aware enough to be uncomfortable about it. And it wasn't... Nothing about this album feels opportunistic to me. None of the instrumentals feel like we're chasing some commercialized black sound or whatever. Like, it's a black sound because I'm black. Period. I know you made the beats as a white woman, but like, because I'm singing them and it's my album, it's a black piece of work as far as I'm concerned. But Smoke was really interesting because I was coming home I was at school. I was leaving school, coming home or whatever, and I got in the car, and I was like, we needed another song. And I was like, well, let me crack into some of these beats that maybe we haven't used yet and see what I can find. And then, what was the original title for Smoke? Like, what was that? Was it Wobble?
That's Wobble. Yeah.
So I played this instrumental called Wobble in the car, and I was like, why have I never used this before? So I was driving home. I drove home, got home. And by the time I got home, I had the hook. Like, I had the melody for the hook in my head. And I actually sent you a video of myself singing a slowed down version of the hook in my kitchen. That was 2 seconds after I entered my home.
God.
When I got home, I was like, dun 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 dun.
I remember that.
And I was like, this is about to be crazy for me. So after I recorded that, I had a little bit of time before my mom got home, which is when I don't record, because she be making a noise. And
she's not home right now.
Yeah, right, which is how we were able to record this podcast. So went downstairs really quickly, put the beat on because I have 2 really large speakers.
Oh, you do?
That rattle off when they are played at full volume. So I was playing the beat through my house. And
I want to hear that.
I was like, because at first it was just me mumbling. A lot of the actual melody building is me mumbling random melodies until I'm like, oh, that works. So it was me just doing the exact same melody that I was doing a lot quicker because the beat is quicker. And I think it was pitched up because it was pitched up when I first got it. I pitched it down myself and then sent it back to you.
Really?
Yeah, it was at a key that it was like a little too high for me to sing, but I still wanted to sing it. So I just pitch shifted the whole thing down like 2 semitones.
Whoa.
And then sent it back to you or whatever.
Completely forgot.
You've forgotten that happened because
Yeah.
I think you were just like, oh, okay, that's fine, whatever.
Yeah, switched it out.
And I think maybe you just did it to your own beat. Like
I think I must have dropped it.
Which
yeah.
But so Smoke is a good example of the short writing process that I have the ability to have, even though it took 9 months to make the album. Right. A lot of the songs were written in 30 minutes to an hour at maximum.
Oh, totally.
The hook for Smoke was me being like, and then I was like, roll the blunt and light it, and then I was like, wait, what's happening? And then I was take a hit and pass it around, all my niggas, and I was like, okay. I was like, okay, we're having fun now. We're having fun.
Like, it's just done.
I was so excited writing Smoke. So excited. Smoke, I think there always comes a point because the writing is always really fast and then it kind of slows down because I have to step back from it for 2 seconds. Right. So there's always a stop and go kind of a thing. So the hook got written really, really quickly. I posted the snippet for Smoke way before it was finished.
You did that little video that you posted?
Because I sung the hook and then you mixed it in really, really quickly that same day.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm in love with this song. And I was like, can I pretty please post the snippet? I don't think had Maelstrom come out yet?
Oh, when did Maelstrom come out? January?
Maelstrom came out in January.
I think it had just come out.
Okay.
But we didn't know it was the next single yet.
No, we had no idea. I mean, this is the early stages of Smoke. I didn't know what Smoke was going to be called. I didn't know anything.
Right.
But so I wrote the hook and I was like, all my niggas been waiting. And I was like, I had been waiting to write the N-word on this album since the beginning.
Right, it was a clean album until then. And it was
a clean album. It was a family-friendly album. It was an album that you could have played for your 3-year-old, realistically speaking. And then I said the N-word, and it changed the whole album after that. Like, Smoke was so fun for me because it was the closest to my blackness that I have felt on this album, actually. And with the exception of Idol. Those 2 songs, I have never felt blacker, which is a testament. I don't know that you are willing to accept this or not.
I can tell what you're about to say.
But you made a beat that made me feel more solidified in my blackness.
That's crazy.
And that made me feel comfortable enough singing the N-word on, like, I don't know that you have, I feel black listening to Smoke. And I sent that snippet to Zion. Zion has been really instrumental for this.
Yeah.
I sent that snippet to Zion, I think, before I posted it. Or maybe right when I posted it, I sent him the tweet. And he was like, oh my God. He was like, this is your best song. That's what he said to me.
Wow.
That snippet, he was like, that's your best song. To this day, when he tells me he's listening to Smoke, he's like, now streaming the best song from Rorschach. That's his favorite because
oh my God.
It's blackness. It's black noise. It's black celebration. It is black movement. It's black singing, and it's black songwriting. So much of that song to me, I was like, this is me being black Cairo Croon right now. And me now, Smoke is contemporary blackness, whereas Idol is like traditional forms of black and like prehistoric forms of blackness. Right. But both of those songs for me, I was like, she really fucked around and made this thing where I can stretch my arms out as a black person and be like, hello, right here. Not that any of this album doesn't feel black to me, but those songs to me, even though I know they weren't for you, feel so intentionally black that I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm enjoying working with Dupree so much, is because, well, this is fun.
Go ahead.
Dupree doesn't have the same ethical restrictions that you do, right? He has obviously
like
never
self-imposed. He
has obviously not made these rules for himself in which it's weird for a white person to be making traditionally black music. Which, I mean, there's another discussion to be had about that or whatever. I mean, I'm still working with him, so I obviously don't care that much.
Right.
But
the sound's fucking good.
Like, yeah. But that restriction has allowed him to make music where I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it's time to get black.
Right.
So yeah.
I mean, when I was making the instrumental for Wobble, when that's what it was, I just found a crazy synthesizer that could do that wah 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 wah.
Yeah.
And I was just like, huh. Like, what if I tried to make something fun? Because I don't do fun unless I absolutely have to.
And it was fun. I think it was fun before it was anything else.
And I thought I was throwing, like, a jazz cymbal beat on there and, like, felt like I was pushing my limits a little bit in that direction.
Yeah. And, it's very heavy on the jazz.
Yeah.
And I remember, so the titling of the tracks is a testament to the world building, too, as well. A lot of times the title will come the second I get the instrumental.
Right.
Smoke was bourbon at first.
It wasn't. You didn't know.
It was between bourbon and smoke.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, this is smoke because weed.
Yes. Well, and I was thinking also like Maelstrom, Valley, Idol, like all of these kind of like really natural settings. Like smoke, I almost thought like volcano smoke in the context of looking at the list of track titles.
Whereas I was completely like, no, this is artificially man-made smoke. Like it's literally just, it's me smoking a joint at a nightclub, which is, I mean, my dad is upstairs recording it. This is also in the aftermath of my dad finding my marijuana.
Do not smoke marijuana.
And that was it was really interesting hearing him say that, because I didn't want to tell him this. I'm gonna send him this when we're done with it. But I'm like, you clearly didn't listen to my album.
This is like a surprise.
If you're gonna be upset about it, like if you're like, I didn't know you were. I was like, but I wrote 3 minutes about me smoking weed. Like, what is wrong with you? If you were paying attention, you wouldn't. This wouldn't have been a shock to you.
Oh
but
my God.
It's fine. Like, do whatever. But yeah, smoke was so fun because smoke was fun. It was a fun song. And Idol, I loved dearly because it was the first time Light was the first time I felt like hopeful about things, like emotionally speaking. But Idol was just like, I was like, I don't know what the fuck she's doing, but I was like, this is incredible. Yeah. You don't know, you didn't know until a couple weeks ago what my
the origins. Yeah.
You had no idea. You had no
clue.
idea that you made a song basically from the color purple.
Like, God, that's
which is just the blackest a movie
like,
can be.
I couldn't believe the clip you said. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And you just like, when I sent it to you, you were like, yeah, this is exactly what I've had in mind for Idol, and you just left it at that.
Yeah.
I had no idea what all was packed into that.
Oh, yeah, no, like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, it's like that scene from The Color Purple. Great, let's go in that direction.
Yeah. Well, and that was at that point where, that was, I think, second or third batch, where in the first batch,
because Idol is part of the upbeats.
Right, because it was that first batch, Valley, Maelstrom, Telephone.
And the bonus that we never used.
Right, and the bonus that we never used. Second batch was like the sad, I forget what I call it, like sadder, slower.
Yeah, something like that.
But it's when you told me to do mangled sound, and that's where like Demon was born out of.
Yes.
The third section is when I was like, what if I added drums? Like, do you remember how long it took me to start adding drums?
Linnaea's relationships with drums is so interesting to me, because she refuses to touch them on a regular basis. Like, the first batch of instrumentals did not have drums on them.
Maelstrom has the smallest amount of drums a song can have on it.
And she was like, oh, like, so what do you want to do? I was like, girl, you just need to add more drums.
Where are the drums? And I was like, oh, I didn't know.
You need to add drums to everything. Like,
and so I think Idol is when I was like, if we're doing drums, we're doing drums.
And you did drums. And I mean, like, your percussion on this album, like, you really did drums quite well and quite thoroughly throughout the whole thing. Yeah. I think it took you a second to really be comfortable doing them because you have these self-imposed rules. But I was like, girl, I need drums to be able to make the music, so you need
It became more about your needs than my discomfort, and that's allyship.
So we made a like prehistorically black beat for Black Song for Idol, and we made some contemporary blackness for Smoke. Yeah. So it worked out real well.
Go Linnea. Good Lord. Okay, well, to wrap things up.
Yes.
We've touched on a number of songs. We dove deep on Smoke and Telephone. Is there any other track that you feel like there is something that needs to be said about it that you haven't at this point?
Something that needs to be said.
And we're not going to do it unless it's necessary, and brevity is
I mean, I will say that Mountaintop is probably the most important song for me on this album, with the exception of Idol. Because Mountaintop went through a similar but quicker process as Telephone did. Yeah. Because I actually think that we were doing okay with Mountaintop. Like we weren't touching it, but I was intentionally like, it's the last song. I'm not about to worry about that right now. And then when we started getting writing, I was like, it's fine. It was going by really, really quickly or whatever. And there's a draft of it that is completely different than what it is now. And another reason why I'm so thankful to have you as a producer for my first thing is you had the audacity to be like, that first verse is mad cheesy, change it. And I was like, that's T. Yeah, so I deconstructed literally the whole song.
I don't remember what that first verse even was anymore.
It was "Get the fuck up out the way."
Oh,
I'm coming
my God.
through with a brand new attitude and a whole brand new groove. Took a while to get me here, so spread the news. I ain't spending no more time thinking about you. Looking nice. But so the rewrite had to happen.
Yeah.
So just deconstructed the whole thing. And I think actually the first thing that I did was play the beat and started screaming, "I'm feeling clean, looking," and I was like, what are you doing? Is any time on this album where I was like, I didn't know where I was going. I was like, what are you doing right now? What are you saying? And then I had
we kept so many of those moments.
We did, which is why I loved this album so much. Yes. But so during the recording process, I was like, I want to make my voice sound fuzzy, so I like threw a little filter over it or whatever, and screamed. I was yelling into the microphone. Like, my parents, thank God they weren't here, because like, this album is very soft. Right. It really is. It is, yeah. That rap joint in Mountaintop, I was like, I had to be away from the microphone.
I was going to ask how far away you were from
I was way closer. I was like way closer. And then I was like, oh no, I'll blow the microphone out. I had to back up from the mic, and then I was shouting into it. And so the song got constructed around that. Yeah. But it went through a couple of different hiccups towards the end, because this was when I was getting frustrated.
You were so ready to click send to iTunes.
Yeah, I was trying
for you.
I was trying to upload everything, and
it was painful.
We were also waiting on Charlie to meet the deadline, which Charlie never was able to do. So I was getting like, oh God, like, can we hurry up?
There were so many elements like not happening.
Yeah, but I was like, we're so close. Yeah, and so I was just like, I was forcing myself to do this really bad writing and going through we went through like maybe 3 or 4 different iterations.
I think so.
And all of which we were like, nope. Yeah. And I was mad every time I had to say no. Right. But I had to say no. Yep. Until you actually, and you are very responsible for what Mountaintop is now, because you told me to stop looking at the Mountaintop as a place. As a destination, right? I was, thinking Mountaintop as, I was stuck in a valley in a location, and now I'm, on the peak of this mountaintop or whatever. And she was like, okay, cool. Stop thinking about it though as a place though. Think about it as the people around you. Think about it as a collection of bodies who have helped you get here or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay.
I remember you texted me how frustrated you were, and I was driving, but I was like, I'm just gonna film myself ranting right now.
I listened to that while I was at work,
and I think that was like my most passionate moment in the entire process of making that album, was like the Mountaintop monologues.
Mountaintop was frustrating for me. I remember a time when I was practicing piano, and I practiced for my senior recital, my last one. There's this really fast song by Robert Hinestera. Or, I'm sorry, it's by this guy named Hinastera.
Okay.
Really fast song, whatever, very chaotic.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get the speed down for anything. And there was a time I was talking to my piano teacher about it, and she was like, why can't you get this? And I was getting frustrated with myself because it wasn't getting done. And I was at the point of almost crying. Mountaintop was the same thing. I was getting very upset with myself for not being able to figure it out. And then you told me that, and I was like,
well, and it was the Mountaintop for the album as well. It wasn't just
it was the last song.
That. Yeah.
We were done.
We were so close.
Right.
And to have that hurdle.
Yeah, I was irritated.
Oh, it was breaking you.
Then you told me to rethink it, and I was like, okay, cool. The next thing I did after you told me that, I went and listened to a song called Wasteland Baby by Hozier. And throughout the song, he says, Wasteland Baby, I'm in love with you. I'm chilled thinking about that song right now. Yeah. And it's him, singing about a place, but it is also him singing to the place and to the person who he's with at the time. Right. And imagining a person as a location, or as a means to get to a location, or as a person to be with when that location is gone. So the first thing I wrote after listening to Wasteland Baby is Mountaintop, I love you. And then I worked backwards from there. I wrote that first, worked backwards, and then worked my way back down to Mountaintop, I love you.
Wow.
I have Hozier to thank for Mountaintop, and I have you, Linnaea, to thank for Mountaintop. Because without those two key elements, it would have been a done song, but it wouldn't have felt as genuine, because I didn't want to center her any longer.
Right.
It not on some like, you don't matter to me anymore, but it's about me.
Right.
It's about my journey. By Mountaintop, I shouldn't even be talking about you anymore.
Right.
It's done.
Yeah.
Which is why all the yous or whatever, the yous in Mountaintop are directed at the people who helped me, like my granny and like my friends and like my brother, who helped me get out of the hole that I was in.
Right.
It can no longer be, in my journey to self-actualization and to like self-comfort, it can't be about her anymore. It can only be about me and the hands who helped me get to where I'm at now.
Yeah. Ugh,
yeah.
Damn. Well, and also it's not just triumphant for your character in the arc of the album,
right,
but it needed to be a triumph of your writing, a triumph of your artistry, and taking the time at an accelerated pace, but taking the time to get there speaks volumes to what the entire album process is. Yeah,
and I couldn't be more grateful for that song, and I think it speaks to me now to keep in mind that it's like, I can't get anywhere by myself, right? You need help sometimes in anything that you do. And to be better, I needed to be able to ask for help and to be able to accept help from family members, right, in the actual process of getting better, but from you in making the album. So yeah, Mountaintop is a thesis statement. It really is.
And then we get to end the whole album on Mountaintop.
Mountaintop.
I love you.
The last thing you hear is Mountaintop, I love you. Mountaintop is myself. Like,
yeah.
It's these other people, but it's also me being like, I love you, Cairo Croon. I love you, Justin. Like, because the album is about me figuring out how to love myself without being in a romantic relationship.
Yes.
I did it. And now I'm here.
And now you're here. Wow, I think we got to end on that note.
Yeah, it's a good ending note. I didn't write an outro for you, so
I didn't know what to do.
I'll take over for you now. So I really want to thank Linnaea for you coming and interviewing me about this.
Of course.
I really, really appreciate it.
I flew all the way from Switzerland to do this.
All the way from Geneva, Switzerland, just to interview little old me in the cornfield in which I live. I want to thank Linnaea for coming and interviewing me, taking time out of her schedule to come and talk to me about the album. I would like to thank everybody who has been listening to the album thus far, and for all the very sweet things that you were not obligated to tell me at all. Like, everybody's been so nice about the album. Every day I get a new text message about what the album, what their favorite song is, and all the drums on Valley are crazy, and all those other things. I want to thank you guys so incredibly much for all the support as Cairo Croon, and I am not going anywhere. This Rorschach stuff is just the beginning. First off, we're not even done. Y'all have voted and let me know that Smoke is the first visual from the album you want to see. It will be the first visual from the album that you were going to see, but I'm making visuals for everything.
You still are?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm making visuals for every song. I'm just not going to do a visual album like I was going to do. Every song is going to get a visual, and I'm just going to keep releasing them.
God, we're so blessed.
And then after Rorschach is done, don't think I'm going anywhere.
You've got the next 2 fucking projects.
I have the next 2 albums planned out, so keep an eye out for me. And also, the Chaotic Culture Podcast, it will return whenever it will return. Y'all know that I am not very good at concluding or ending things, so I will see you when I see you.